So why would a squatter have rights in my home? Let's get into it. Hey guys, my name is Sandy. I'm a licensed realtor and licensed loan originator here in the Central Florida area. And I like to do these little videos just to keep you knowledgeable or make you knowledgeable about different things on the market when it comes to real estate and home lending. Today I wanted to cover a topic on why would squatters have rights to my home, right? You heard the term squatters. This was very popular back in 08 and 09 and 07 when the market had fallen and a lot of people were leaving their homes. And people are moving into these abandoned homes and trying to take them over and doing all these different stuff, trying to get control of the home because the owner didn't want the home anymore and all this great stuff. So what exactly is that? So a squatter is going to be someone occupying your property, which is a little bit different than trespassing, right? So if somebody, and a squatter could also be a trespasser. So somebody could come on the property as a trespasser and they keep living there, so then they become a squatter of the same property. Or they could come on the property, trespass for a day or two, leave, and then they're not really a squatter. An oldover tenant could also be a squatter. Maybe you had a tenant, you're a landlord, you have a tenant and they were paying rent, and then the lease ends or they stop paying rent, and now you're going into some kind of legal action to try to get them out of the property and they don't want to leave. So they technically could be either called a squatter or an oldover tenant based upon what's in the lease and based upon what your state says about an oldover tenant. But if the lease ended and you have no stipulation in your lease regarding an oldover tenant and all the lease says is the tenant should leave at the end of the term of the lease, then the tenant should leave. If they decide to stay, then they become a squatter. Maybe you have an abandoned house or an abandoned building and people know it's abandoned and it's in a nice neighborhood, or maybe they just like the area or something, and they move in, as they trespass into the property. First of all, that's how they get in there, and then they decide to live there. And then there are certain things that they might do to try to get claim on the property, because a lot of time the goal of a squatter is to take over the property from the owner freely and legally. So for them to do this, they have to establish that they've been living in the property for a certain period of time. They have to establish that they get mail at the property and that they were actually maintaining the property. And they might say, hey, I was maintaining the property in lieu of rent. So instead of paying you a monthly rent, I was, fixing all this stuff up and maintaining everything for you. So now the property is mine. And based upon the state, they may be able to go through certain legal stuff or documentation and all that great stuff and actually take the property over. Now, it's not normal and typical, but it can happen. And people that studies the law, or they might go to an attorney who specializes in squatters' rights, and they might be able to do it. So the thing is, if you have anything that's empty, an empty home, an empty building, you want to board it up or put an alarm on it or something to not make it easy for someone to come and squat. Because you might be saying, hey, it's my property, I bought it, I have all of the legal documentation. They might get fraudulent documentation to say, no, that's not true, this is actually legal documentation. Then you have a day of fighting in court, or days or months and years of fighting in court to try to get your property back. So the rule of thumb is, if you're going to have an empty property, especially if it's not in a HOA or a gated community, so it has more access to the public, you want to make sure that you either have some kind of gate around it. You want to put up all kind of no trespassing sign, because there's another rule in some state that says if you do not have a no trespassing sign, then the trespasser did not know that they weren't supposed to trespass. Believe it or not, that's a rule. So you want to put up a trespassing signs if they know the house is empty. Also, you might have a big yard, you might have a big backyard. That's why sometimes you'll see people with land, they have signs all over it saying no trespassing, because people could sometimes go on land and build their own little home on the land, whether it be a mobile home or a hut or whatever they build there, maybe even a full-on home itself, and then try to claim that the land is theirs, and then they're going to bring up the squatter's rights. So you want to make sure if you have empty land, empty house, empty anything, you have the no trespassing all over. You want to be very distinctive if you're renting to tenants, that you know what the tenant's rights are in your state, that you know it when the lease ends, and if the tenant decides not to leave, what rights do you have to get them out? How long is that going to take? This is especially true in New York, because New York is very tenant friendly. So sometimes it takes a lot longer to get a tenant out of your home than the normal other states or the regular other states. And by the time you get the tenant out, you might be in foreclosure because you're not getting any money from the property, and so you can't pay the mortgage, and the story goes on and on. So what you want to do is you want to make sure you have everything up front. Now, here's the thing that I've seen, and this is hard. Sometimes you buy a property and you're like, okay, I bought a property in February. The first mortgage is due in April. So I need to get the property rented by April. And then sometimes someone might come along. They're not the best tenant. You don't qualify them. They're like, oh yeah, I'll rent it. And because you're so desperate to get it rented so you could pay the mortgage, you rent it to the wrong person, and then it becomes a great ordeal. So if you're a landlord, it's very important that you're venting your tenants. There's so much different website that they have now that you could actually go and do a background check on the tenants. You could hire professionals to do it, or you could do it yourself. There are different websites you could run somebody's driver's license on just to see where they are with that. You could do all these different background checks. You could hire a company to do it for you, but it's very, very important because you don't know who you're renting to, and you don't want your nice tenant that you thought was a very nice tenant. You know what I find interesting though? I find interesting that a tenant is always so great in the beginning. Like when you first meet a tenant, right? You're the landlord, you're the agent, whatever you are. They're like so nice. Oh, I'll take care of the property. Oh, nobody has ever had any problems with me. I'm the best tenant since sliced bread, and all this great stuff until they move in. And I know this because I've been a landlord since 1994. The day they move in, I just aged myself, right? The day they move in is when you truly know who you have. So it's a catch-22. The day they move in is the day you truly know who you have. And it's the same day you know if you're going to have a problem down the road. Because as soon as they move in, all of a sudden, Mr. and Mrs. Nice Tenant becomes crazy. They talk to you anyway. If the rent is due, they curse you out. They don't want to pay the rent. All kind of craziness. So you need to avoid this up front before you put them in the home. Because once they get in the home or the condo or the apartment, whatever it is you're renting, it's going to be very difficult to get them up based upon the state. So you also need to know before you buy investment properties, if you intend to rent them, whether it be short-term or long-term, what are your rights should your tenant not pay the rent? How long are they allowed to live in the property without paying rent? How long is the process of eviction? All this stuff you need to know because you just do not know who you're going to rent to. Everybody looks good in the beginning, just like when you go on a date or you meet a guy or girl for the first time, everybody's on their best behavior. So you really have to take the precaution as to do all the background stuff. And if it looks like a dog, smell like a dog, it probably is a dog, maybe you shouldn't rent to that person. If you are going to rent to someone, you're doing the application process and you see what's on the paper is not making sense, they're telling you they're the best thing since sliced bread, but their paperwork is not making sense, then guess what? It does not make sense. Do not rent to that person because they might become a squatter or something else. And on top of being a squatter, a lot of these tenants damage the property. And so you have to fix it. And a lot of times they try to live out their security. So that's another thing you want to do. You want to make sure your lease state that you cannot live out your security as rent. Your security deposit cannot be used as rent, right? Because a lot of times it says it in the lease, but the tenant tried to do it. So what a lot of landlords do is they take first and last month's rent plus a security deposit. That way you can never say you're living out your security deposit because last month rent is already collected up front before you move in. And that's one of the reasons, that's one of the way you prevent them from using the security deposit as rent, because you have no idea what you're going to go into once they move out, and you need to know you're able to cover any damages that they make. So very important that you vent your tenants, that you have no trespassing signs on anything that you want nobody to trespass on, and that you secure any vacant anything, so house, condo, whatever it is, make sure it's secure so it's not easy for someone to get in there. And it may not be a bad idea in today's society to make sure it's alarmed and you have cameras on it and they see the cameras. I know they could throw stones and break the camera, but you'll see that the camera was broken. You'll see a person throwing the stone and break the camera. That's going to be very important. So squatters do have rights. Squatters could take your house over as their own through legality. A squatter may not necessarily just be what you're thinking. It could even be a family member. Maybe you had a family member and you had an empty house and you told them that they and their family could stay there until a certain amount of time. Maybe you had nothing in writing. They stay there for a certain amount of time. They do not want to leave. You're trying to get them out. They're not leaving because now they're saying, well, you know, we're the one that maintained the property. They weren't here and we maintained the property while we lived there, so that was the rent we were paying, and all these different kind of things. So you want to make sure that you know your rights as a landlord, that you know if you have anything empty or anything like that, you know what's going to be the recourse, that you know what happens when you rent to someone, what the eviction process looks like, how long they need to stay there, what you need to do. If I have relatives staying in my house and I don't want to leave, what rights do I have? If I have an empty house and I have relatives staying there, can I get them out? All this great stuff is very, very important. Feel free to give us a call, send us a text, and the number should be somewhere up here, somewhere below. If you want to do a consultation on that, all our consultations are always complimentary. But thank you so much for listening, and let me know what your thoughts are on squatters' rights. Thank you so much. I'll see you in the next video.